I had a pretty unremarkable childhood. I had an amazing, loving family. Probably, I mean, we were the fun house. So everyone would come over. My parents would give you the soda pop that your other mom and dads wouldn't give you. We had all the candy. We had the Mountain Dew. So not necessarily the healthiest, environment to grow up, but it was very relaxed and filled with love. And so it's kind of interesting when I look retrospectively on my eating disorder, which I developed about 7 years ago at the tail end of high school. It's interesting because in a sense, I always think about how I've always felt this inner desire, and maybe this is just a Gen X, Gen Z, whatever Gen Z thing, where you have this desire to be seen. And I remember when like social media first started coming out in 2006, 7 with YouTube, and I was on the platform there. I was uploading YouTube videos immediately when it came out, and I'm kind of a camera slut. I like being on camera. I
Hey,
like
look, you're talking to the guy that does 4 podcasts a week. I go on
true.
camera with my ice baths. I make reels from those. Like, trust me, we are brothers from another mother, is what we are.
But it's interesting because I feel like I always felt like my story was too boring. Everyone that's been
Yeah.
great they come from some sort of traumatic past or some sort of hardship that they did through. And I had a really easy childhood. I pretty much got anything I ever wanted as a kid. I was very spoiled on a lot of senses. And I feel like my eating disorder kind of came out of my own manifestation for a need to overcome something, which sounds
Yeah.
kind of weird, but that's kind of what I think of it now, 7 years past that as.
It's
I
not it's not weird at all, because if everybody around you is that video whore, as you kind of defined it, and they want attention, the reason they get the attention is they have a story. I had to overcome childhood trauma. I had to overcome a weight problem. I had to overcome health problems. So they all have these things that make them, in their minds, relevant. And
Mhm.
so for Ryan, I'm pretty boring. My parents love me. They feed me junk food and I don't get fat. And what's my story? And so it's a wonderful theory that you have there as to why the eating disorder began. You needed a story. And it's kind of weird for people to like consciously think about that. Come on, dude, you had a great life. You're living the life. But I don't think they realize the power of the need for a story.
Very true. I mean, we grow up watching movies. I mean, social media is even more intense, and we just see constant story all around us, and we kind of want to live in that fantasy in a sense. I did have like some childhood trauma. I moved around a lot as a kid,
Yeah,
which did definitely impacted that aspect of me developing and trying to create
right.
control because eating disorders are all about control. And for me, it manifested out of actually me trying to improve myself. I was trying to actually become fit when I started developing my eating disorder. I had I just went through a really bad breakup right before. And so I think that was kind of my domino that broke the camel's back,
The catalyst, yes.
the catalyst. But it was sort of a thing, like I mentioned, with the building a story that I think had been developing since I was a young teenager and I started getting into social media.
Yeah,
And so I think that's really when it began. I always used to tell my story and say it started when I broke up with my girlfriend and my life kind of fell apart.
yeah.
But really, it was building for the almost 10 years prior to that.
So I'm curious about the social media aspect, because there is debate in society about the impact of social media. I know they did a study on Instagram and
Mm.
how all of these, especially young girls, teenage girls, that they find their worth in this, and that when they're on there, they have to find their worth in it. Anyway, so there's this move to kind of ban kids 18 and younger, under 18, from being on there until you're an adult, so that's at least psychologically at 18 you're somewhat ish ready, compared to say 12, 13, 14, when a lot of these kids are on there and they're having to be validated that way. Do you think that contributed somewhat to your spiral that got you to the eating disorder?
Well, I think social media definitely like contributed to it. Maybe not in the sense of I was watching people and I was like, oh, I want to be fit like you, or it actually had nothing to do with that. It was more of just like, I think for me, it was specifically around story. But I don't think that's the correct approach to just straight up ban people. It's kind of like when they tried to ban alcohol entirely in the 1920s,
Yes.
and that didn't work. Or, I mean, think about it this way. We have to be 21 to drink, or, I
Right.
mean, yeah, drink. And how many people do you know started,
Well,
had a drink before they were 21?
they legally drink at 21, but almost all of us had some
Yeah.
before that. Yes.
So I think of it like that. I think it's kind of like trying to put a Band-Aid
Well,
on the problem.
Pandora's box is already open. You've already
Exactly.
given kids a taste of social media. I don't think very young kids should be on there, and maybe
No.
pre-adolescent teens. But again, there's an argument both sides. But it's already out there, and people are already on there, and kids of all sorts are on there, and that's a parental thing. If the parents are fine with them being on there, so be it. I know a lot of parents my age and younger that they don't let their kids on there at all because
Yeah.
of the predators that are out there. It's a sick world we're in now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's truly up to the way we raise our children
Yes.
and instilling in them certain values. And I think it's really more about creating the correct conversation around social media and less about anything black and white. But we don't operate like that. We like the fast answers,
Yes.
especially now. So we need it. We always search for a black and white answer. That's why modern medicine kind of sucks when it comes to chronic conditions. But it's just too nuanced. And I think it's more about creating the correct conversation about it and instilling the correct values with our kids that are
Right.
going to lead them to using social media as a tool rather than a detriment.
Well, you
Because it's a
said
balance.
well, you said your parents were really good, and that's wonderful. What was their position about social media? Because they had to have noticed maybe some behavioral changes that were created in you, and especially after your breakup with the girlfriend, they had to see this distraught teenage kid. Did they say anything? Did they notice?
I think they knew after we moved a few times that it was hard on me, specifically the last move that we did. Um, but I don't think they really, I mean, I talk to my parents about this all the time. My dad specifically, nobody really noticed how bad my eating disorder was
Yeah.
until I was already deep in, and I was living at home at the time. I was going to college and I was just commuting. No one actually knew how bad my eating disorder was until they saw me like basically getting, I think I had my shirt off or something. My dad saw me and I was like all bones.
Yeah.
And he really never noticed it because I mean, everyone's so stressed just working a 9 to 5. I
Yeah.
think he's just trying to hold everything together,
Yes.
and it didn't hit him till then,
Yeah. So
and I hid it too. I was hiding it. I wasn't like trying to get attention.
yeah.
What I
Well,
mean?
it's a hidden thing. So was it anorexia? Was that the
Yes.
eating disorder? Yeah.
Yeah, it was anorexia nervosa, and I had a touch of orthorexia. So I was really addicted to like going to the gym, and
Yeah.
and everything was about being better. It actually wasn't. I think a lot of eating disorders, I mean, it's all about control.
Well,
But for me, I thought I was being healthier. Like
in
I legit thought I was being healthy.
yeah, in your mind, you can rationalize it and say, oh, well, I'm not allowing myself to become obese because I know if I'm bigger, that's going to cause me problems down the road. So you can rationalize it. You can
Yeah.
rationalize anorexia, which, by the way, those of you that don't know that term for eating disorder, it's where you're so obsessed with being healthy that, and in the gym, kind of going crazy in the gym, but in food, it's
Yeah.
people that say, I must have grass-fed beef. If it's grain-fed, it's going to harm me. And it's like when you get to that level of obsession, it is an eating disorder.
Totally. Let's not talk about some people in the community that talk about that, say those things.
I
But I agree.
That's okay. I don't mind stirring the pot a little bit, but there are people in the keto and carnivore community that they get so obsessed about it. And look, my philosophy is if you want to do those things and you like doing those things and you get the benefits from it, and you can afford it and all the things, go for it. But don't
Yeah.
make it this, if you eat grain-fed beef, you're gonna keel over and da-da-da. And it's like, no, like let's make it inclusive, not this
Exactly.
I
We
Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine.
I mean, you know this. I'm sure you talk about it a lot too. Is we see it in this mission to educate the people that don't know. We somehow turn into this bubble of only. We're an echo chamber of only speaking to ourselves now. We're not getting the larger message out that's more important. And this is like the same thing with mental health. Mental health has been really big. I mean, I love that you've been so open about your mental health journey, because it's so imperative to just general health at all.
Yes.
But I think people have made it, especially over the last 2 years, this thing where it's all here when it's really a cohesive, full body experience.
Yes.
And so I really discovered in my eating disorder journey, because when you go through standard of care, they're really all about all foods fit. You need to eat. You need to challenge your paradigm. Eat foods that scare you. And I believe, by the way, I'm all for like challenging your mindset. I don't think anyone should fear like crackers and cookies. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But I also should think, if you're in I look at eating disorders as similar to other autoimmune or neurodegenerative conditions of having brain inflammation. You have stuff going, you're just inflamed in here, and you're just not. And for me, it gets worse, because when you're undernourishing yourself, you can't think straight. Like you're literally not being logical no matter what you say, because you're not feeding yourself. And to me, the solution to getting out of that state when you're so nutritionally deprived isn't to eat copious amounts of pasta and cookies and carbs and then become leptin resistant and all of these problems that you develop through the eating disorder process and anorexia. It causes you to gain weight, but you don't rebalance any of the neurotransmitters that you messed up getting there. And so I have a different approach to that now, where it's a lot of mindset work, but equally about focusing on nutrient density and talking about the fact that most of the foods that we are telling you to fit in this weird plate that we've designed didn't exist 100 years ago. So it makes no sense. It's a marketing thing.
And so emulating what I like to call food-like disease agents, like anything that's like crap garbage, again, another phrase that I coined, because people will eat those things because it's like way overstimulated. I could just imagine like paleo cavemen having a Little Debbie snack cake and going,
boy, bouncing off the walls.
Like so overstimulate them, because it's unlike anything that you would find in nature, in real food. And then once you have that, it's like a drug or alcohol addiction. You need more of it to satisfy and get the same buzz, so to speak, that you got from that first initial taste. I've even gone back sometimes, Ryan, just to see how things taste now. I'll just taste them.
I bet it's wild. I've had some.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. I had a sip of Mountain Dew about 8 months ago.
Yes.
And I used to guzzle 2 liters. Like we would go to Walmart and they had great sales. They're like 70 cents a 2 liter. Right. We would get 24 of them for a week. And we would drink one a day probably as a family. And I tried that thing, and it was insanely sweet. It was actually off-putting.
Coca-Cola is that way for me. I used to drink back in the day 16 cans of like full sugar, full high fructose corn syrup Coke. 16 cans.
That's wild.
And I had one, I had one about 2 years ago, I believe it was, just to kind of, okay, what's it taste like now? And as soon as it went in my mouth, I was just like throwing up. It was just so gross. I'm like, how did I ever get one in, much less 16 a day?
It's insane. I mean, I used to be the Diet Coke guy, so I would drink like tons of after I quit soda, I went to diet soda, which is worse. See, it's actually sweeter.
Well,
And yeah, it was wild.
I can tell you, going off the 16 cans and I went on the Atkins diet, I immediately killed all of those sodas, and I went on to Diet Coke, Coke Zero,